just sort of a little bit about, we'll talk about, we had a little conversation earlier. I'm going to give you some insight to where you are pretty quickly in the economy, which I think will be helpful to you. I was fortunate enough to have a job after the '86 Tax Act, which is very similar to what we're going through today. And after 1986, there was no financing available. The market collapsed. Values dropped 40 to 50% across the board, mainly because debt and equity was not available. So fortunate enough for me, I had a job, thank God. I was with a syndicator who was still in business, and my job was to sell their assets. And as the tax law got worse, my job actually got better. So somebody asked me would I want to be in acquisitions earlier, and I'm not sure where the question came. What you really would want to be in today, if you could do anything, I know acquisition sounds glamorous. The reason I got the job is I was willing to do dispositions, and that's really probably the place to be for the next 18 to 24 months, is all the banks, all these syndicators, all these institutional capital providers, Principal, BlackRock, own a lot of assets today that they've got to dispose of. And so probably today, where I was fortunate would be a similar time for you, that's probably the arena that's got the most assets that need to change where they are. So that's a little bit about where you are. The other thing we were talking about earlier, this is also a great time to come out and be in the real estate business. Good. Hopefully not very many of you own assets today. We're fortunate to own some, thank God, but values have changed from a perspective of what they're worth in the last 24 months. And so if you can come out today and buy assets at what they're selling for today, it's a great time to enter the marketplace. So just a little, I know you guys are going, God, am I going to be able to get a job out of here in May? Be patient with it. Just stay with it, stay the course, don't give up being in the real estate industry. It's a great industry. You pick a product. I was fortunate to pick apartments, and I've never done anything else. But pick a product and stick with it. Even if you have to sweep a floor at a syndication firm or a capital provider or a bank for the next 18 months, get yourself in there, because the opportunities are coming at you, and they're going to come at you fast, because by 2011 and 12, the REIT industry will pick back up again. There's new REITs being formed every day. There's 27 new REITs formed the last quarter of last year. I was at a REIT conference in Chicago. $50 billion was raised this last quarter just to go into these REITs. And these are REITs that have no product. So they're going to have to start finding product. So stick with it. Be patient. Don't give up. It's easy to give up, but I stuck with it, and thank God it's worked out okay. So now we'll talk about what I'm doing today, the evolution of it all. We own a company that is I'll read it because it's probably better to read it. We're a private equity firm that specializes in apartment housing. That's all we do. We do acquisitions and repositioning of assets, redevelopment, and what we are is a value-add apartment fund. Relating it to what you probably have seen, does anybody know who Blackstone is? Everybody knows who Blackstone is and what they do. We're very similar to a Blackstone in the sense that we manage capital. We don't manage assets. Sort of the differential is what you're managing and who you're managing it for. And so what we do is manage capital. And we get capital from places like state governments. We get them from high net worth individuals. We get them from universities, all across the board. And what we do with them is we take that money and invest it in multifamily housing. And the multifamily housing we do is not new construction. It's taking the old, ugly apartment buildings that you guys ride around and see every day and fix them up and make them better. That's the business we're in. We were formed in 2001. Actually, our beginning day was September 10th, 2001. That was our official day we opened our business, which was a lot of fun for the rest of us. We have 14 people that work for us. We're a little less staffed with as much capital as we have, as big as we are, because we're capital managers, not asset managers. If we had 19,000 units and we were a REIT or a syndicator, we would have somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 employees. We have chosen not to be in that business. We like just managing the capital side. Privately owned today, we manage over 500 million. That's a little outdated. And we have about 19,200 units. We're in 23 states, and the advantage we have is we can go anywhere. We're not having to be in West Palm Beach or having to be in Gainesville. We can do Omaha, Nebraska just as quickly as we can do Gainesville, Florida. And ask questions, please, if I don't cover something. What do I do? This is just a lot of rigmarole. We'll talk about it, but these are areas that we cover. We have in the past, just to give you an idea of what we do, we pay on average for the funds that we've had. We're on Fund 7, even though it's Fund 6, because we have one institutional fund. We, on average, have returned to our investors over the last 15 years between 20 and 24% internal rate of return on their money. It's just blocking and tackling. You know, it's just buying something, fixing it up, improving it, and selling it. We're not in the long-term hold business. But those kind of yields motivate investors. And we've closed out of the 7 funds, we have 3 funds that are still open. So we've gone from beginning to end in the fund business. And again, it's the basic apartment business. This is not complicated stuff. It's just doing it consistently and upgrading apartments. We average about 65% leverage. We see cash on cash going into a deal of about 8%. You guys all know what cash on cash is, I presume, or you wouldn't be where you are. And that's not difficult to get today. Today, cash on cash is about 10 to 11. That'll normalize itself out to 7 to 8. But right now, because of where you can borrow money, especially in our industry, it's 5.5 to 5 3/4. We can get almost 10 to 11% on our money day one in the investment. And all that's sheltered today, because thank God we still have shelter from depreciation and interest expense. Why we do what we do and why it's successful today more than it was 18 months ago is people are no longer leaving apartments and buying a home. I presume, how many in this room today own a condo? Okay, I would have told you 3 years ago I would have asked that question and 60% of the room would have raised their hand. That's what's changing. The people today are not buying apartments anymore, leaving apartments and trying to go into a condominium or home ownership. They're not as pleased with the fact that their friend who bought a condo 3 years ago, who thought he made $30,000, $40,000. Do I need to stop?
No, I was just trying to point them to some seats down.
Okay. There's some seats up here if you guys want to come sit up here. But where the marketplace is, people are no longer leaving apartments to move into condos or buying a home. It's just not available. Plus, you can't get the financing anymore. Yes?
Can you talk about, you touched on closing a fund. Can you talk about the timing as you sell properties in individual funds at different times, about the timing of when you sell a property and the disbursement of funds and closing of the disbursement of returns?
The whole fund?
Yeah.
Okay. For instance, Fund 4 had 16 properties in it. So the way it works is it takes about 2 years to buy the 16. So you have a time frame to buy them. And then as you sell them, you return the capital back to the partners. And then at the last deal, in that fund, Fund 4, the first deal was bought in 2002, and the fund closed in 2007. But what we do is buy them. We're rehabbers. We buy them, fix them up, clean them up, and then sell them back to the marketplace. We're sort of a different product that's really out there in the marketplace, because most people who buy real estate are longer-term owners of product. So we're sort of a clean-up shop and put it back to the marketplace. But why this marketplace is improving is people are no longer moving, plus your generation. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure, had fun getting into college, and I have an 18-year-old trying to go to college today, and that's a lot of fun. And all that big bubble that's out there is now coming out of college and looking for work, looking for a place to live. All those people used to try to buy a condo because that was the thing to do 3 or 4 years ago. Now all those people are moving into rental housing. So you got this huge bubble that's coming out that's working through our industry. So for us, it's an unbelievable time to be in this industry because you can buy what's there. You can't build today because nobody's going to lend you any money to build. So the most viable opportunity is to fix up the older product, which is what we're doing. We just talked about lack of development, plus there's lack of capital. We've raised a fund over the last 18 months. We just closed about 3 weeks ago. It was about $140 million. We are one of 2 companies that were able to raise capital like ours in 2009. That's it. Most of the people were unsuccessful raising capital last year, not because people didn't realize it was a good time, but people who had capital had other problems that they were having to deal with. Most institutions just were not in a place to put out capital. And then the other thing about us, and I don't know if you know much about apartments, but we get financing through 3 sources. Fannie Mae, which is still out there, thank God. They actually gave them more money yesterday, $1.2 trillion. Feel good about that. Freddie Mac, which are basically the same company today, which I don't understand, and HUD. And people hear HUD, they think of affordable housing. HUD does all kinds of financing. We don't. There's a division of HUD that doesn't do affordable housing. It's conventional housing. It's the 223F program and the 221D4 program, and we get money from that source as a source of capital. The great thing about apartments versus all the other industries you'll look at in commercial real estate today and apartments, commercial can't get financing today. It's very difficult because none of the conduits or the banks are lending money. So it's a very difficult time. For us, we have an abundance of debt that's out there today, and we borrow it somewhere between 5.25% to 5.5% on a 10-year non-recourse basis. Unbelievable that we can buy the kind of cap rates we can today and borrow the money the way we do. Ready? Questions? Did I answer your question? Okay. Again, I think it's good for you. Somebody asked me how we do what we did earlier. This is where we get our money from. High net worth individuals, which are people that are sort of have $250,000 that they can throw away, if you want to just put it in the simplest form. Corporate taxable is most of our states are corporate taxable, or institutional like United Technologies or somebody like that. Public pensions are our states. Endowments like the universities. Fund of funds, companies. That's place you guys might want to look for jobs in the future. There are fund of funds. There's a company called Metropolitan Group, which is an investor of ours. They're one level further behind us. They go raise money for a group of funds, and then they give people like us some of that capital. That's an interesting place to be. That world sort of created itself in 2004 and 2005 because the smaller institutions, like a smaller university, needed some expertise. So there's these group of fund of funds, and that's probably something I can get you the names on those guys because that would be good for them to look at. And then smaller foundations like family foundations. Those are the markets we cover. How about that? and we buy. The great thing about being a fund manager instead of an apartment manager, you can go anywhere. If there's a great deal in St. Louis, or there's a great deal in Salt Lake City, Utah, we're not in the property management business. We can be nimble enough to go anywhere, and that's where we're based. And it's important to know that because we did talk about earlier where you guys need to be looking for jobs, and I've constantly tried to get people to move out of the state of Florida and look for jobs elsewhere. I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida. Never thought in my lifetime I would ever leave West Palm Beach, Florida. I thought anybody who lived outside of West Palm Beach, Florida was an idiot. And my opportunity was in Nashville, Tennessee. And thank God I took it. So my only point to you is I know all of you want to live in Florida. You're going to school down here. I am understanding of that, but we talked about it earlier. The people that do what we do are not in the state of Florida. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a particular reason why I see like New York, for instance, why you have to
Well, we are really second and third tier market players. We look in New York, but I wouldn't look in New York City. I would probably look in, Albany. It's probably not my place. I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm not in Philly. I like Connecticut because I like Hartford, and I've owned in Hartford. But to be competitive, we don't really compete well with major cities because I've got other capital that Blackstone will beat me to death in a major city because the deals are bigger and they have cheaper capital.
Talk about why you said it was really hard for your fund and your competitors to raise money, only one or two funds. Meanwhile, the public REITs are raising huge amounts of money in these blind,
Secondaries.
So why the dichotomy? Why such a difference in availability of capital?
Well, really what's happened is it's not that people did not think it was a great time to invest. Where we get capital from are high net worth individuals, which was not a problem, which is where the REITs are getting their money from. Where the problem today is for capital, and companies like Sentinel out of New York, great company, all of their money comes from corporates and states. And their company is about a third the size they were 18 months ago. Because what's happened is the state of Alaska, has bad investments that they've done over the last 3 years. So what's happened to them is all of their capital is going to protect those assets. So really, it's really the source of where our capital comes from more than the advantage of our opportunity. Because what you'll see, which we talked about earlier, is you'll have companies like ours, not ours, but apartment type companies or retail companies go public in the next 24 months. Because what's happened, and your point's a good one, is that source of capital is very viable and very aggressive and paying, 3 or 4% today on the REIT level. And we're struggling finding the capital. We stayed on this side because private capital was cheaper and debt was cheaper until 2007. Now that's reverted back, which is the way it was in 91 and 92. We all became REITs in 91 and 92 because that was the cheapest source of capital. That changed in 98 because debt got cheaper. So that's sort of where we're now making another transition back. Does that answer your question? Okay. So that's our markets. We're in most of these places, have owned in most of these places. Probably the place we don't do today, we just broke back into Florida. About 4 months ago, I bought a deal in Jacksonville. Had 14 properties here in 2003 and 2004 and 2005. Fortunate enough to come to the conference that we have here annually and see that the condo guys were rock stars, so I sold. When I saw those guys come in and everybody loved them, and they were the hottest thing going, and all these guys wanted to work for them, I was gone. Put them on the marketplace, made a bunch of money, and now we're getting back in. And I love and I'll continue to come back because it helps me know what to do in the state of Florida. But we're breaking back in. Again, it's a great time to buy down here. The condo world is what it is, but we like places like Jacksonville. We like places like Daytona. We just made a run at a deal in Fort Lauderdale on the Intercoastal. So we're coming back into Florida. It's a good time. The good news is if you want to stay here, it's also a great time to be buying in Florida. This shows you what we've bought and sold over the years, sort of answers your question, how we do what we do. We started, the darker color is dispositions, the lighter color is acquisitions, and it shows you how we go through the disposition process. Actually, we've sold 2 deals in 2009. We stopped selling really 2008 and 2009 because we don't have to sell. Our debt's long-term. Cap rates changed in about, I'd say, March of 2008, went up to about 8.25 in our business. We're about 6.5, 6.25, so we just stopped. And we've started buying again when cap rates got to the point where the sellers would meet to our demands, which turned out to be about an 8 cap rate. Yes?
Is it ever a downside to be in so many different markets with your general partner having property manage in so many different areas? Is that ever a risk or an issue?
No, because for us, and maybe, but more often than not, our property management companies are regionally based. Like our Iowa manager does Des Moines, Omaha, glamorous cities, places for jobs, Des Moines, Kansas City, St. Louis, Omaha. So really, that's where he stays for us. So when I was with Insignia, we had 480,000 units in 50 states, including Puerto Rico, so 51. And I think we were in 340 different cities, all managed out of Greenville, South Carolina. I will tell you, that is 100 times worse than what we do, because it's too complicated and it's different. You know, what works in Omaha doesn't work in West Palm Beach. You know, hardwood floors, you know, dark colors are what people want in Omaha, Nebraska. You do that in West Palm Beach, you won't rent an apartment. So it's important to have that local knowledge as a partner. These are our funds, sort of talking about yields. Not all of them are finished out, but the first 4 are done. Actually, the number whatever that one, 4 is done at about 23, 24%. But that's what we've done. And then Fund 4, Fund 6 got finished at exactly $140 million. And we have one institutional fund. We had one fund with one partner. It was Fannie Mae, which I'm sure you guys don't know that Fannie Mae also has an equity division of their company. They gave us money to invest on the equity side, not on the debt side. They were one of the largest equity providers in the apartment industry for the last 4 or 5 years. Who knew it? My partner used to work for Fannie Mae, and he ran that division. So that's how I knew about it. But it's interesting because you would never think that Fannie Mae was in the equity business. And that's been one of our most successful funds, because what they bought was really workforce housing. That fund was really set up to buy things that helped the average customer and give it a better product. And the funny thing is, it's actually probably done as well or better than all of our other funds, and it was really just set up to help the average person with a better product.
Could you talk a little bit about how you structure these funds and these investments for the investors, preferred returns, so we can get a feel for?
Like that?
Okay.
I'm evolving. Well, my partner, this is my partner's format, so there's usually a reason for it. This is how we raise money. We have 3 partnerships in every fund because we have to be sensitive to 3 different kinds of customers. You have the high net worth individuals that want the losses, right? You invest in real estate, you don't want to pay any taxes on your real estate, right? That's one. We have a private REIT format, which works for the foundations, because the foundations have what's called a UBTI, which is Uniform Business Tax, or whatever it is. Some crazy thing that if you get passive losses, you have to pay some tax on those passive losses, and you won't raise a nickel. Somebody asked me how you raise money. We didn't know this when we first started. Our first fund was $17, $18 million. We didn't realize that people were taxed differently on how they gave you capital, right? And it changes yearly, so you can't walk out of here and think this is going to be the rule of thumb. It changes tomorrow. But we had to be sensitive to the foundations because they have UBTI issues. And then we have ERISA issues with the corporates. And don't ask me how that works. It's just one more level of what we do. So we really have 3 partnerships inside every fund. So that's the first one. We try our fund size, just tell you how the marketplace is. We went out at $300 million. We ended up at 140. Grateful to have the 140. Closed it out. And let's see. Then the rest of it is what the institutions make us do. From that on, we're sort of limited by what the institutions make us do in order to get the capital. A, they want a 9% preferred return on their money, okay, today. That's how they're going to give me money today. So they get all their money back, and a 9% return before I see a nickel. Okay? Now I get a management fee of the fund, but I don't get any profits, which is the next line, which is what I'm motivated by, is the net profits. Because we get 20% of the upside, but in order to get to that 20%, I've had to give them all their money back, and it's $140 million before I see anything. So I better not be wrong too many times. After that, we get a catch-up. Anybody know what a catch-up is? Not? Does anybody, do you guys cover catch-ups? Okay. A catch-up in our business is I haven't been able to get any yield on my money, right? So I get my investors all their money back in a 9. If once that happens, my money, my 20%, has a catch-up to it. So the next dollars that come out of that deal are 50% of those go back to the general partner, whatever the partnership is, until I get my money in a 9. Does that make sense? Before you start splitting the next dollar. So I have an opportunity to catch up at, that's why it's called that, catch up at the preferred and the 9. Okay? Management fee, this is what we eat off of. We get a 1.5%, and this is market. If you guys ever want to raise a fund, this is market. 1.5% of the dollars that you manage, and you get the total fee from the beginning. So this is a $140 million fund, 1.5% fee. Was that $2.1 million of management fee for that fund. Now, the problem with that is you got to pay that back. So you better get, it's sort of a timing thing. You don't want to be sitting on those funds for so long without assets to back them up. So it's sort of set up to motivate you to get those dollars out. Again, the rest of it's sort of meaningless. And then we have one of our investors who wanted co-investment rights, which all that means, you guys deal with that at all. When they give you money, somebody wants the ability to co-invest with you on every deal. We have one of our institutional partners that if it's a big deal, they want to split the partnership with us because they have a need to put out more capital. Okay? But if you really from concentration limits down, that's driven by the capital. And the more institutional that is, the more refined that part of the process is. That help? Okay. Now, get down to what I know how to do. Everything before now is what my partner does. This is what I do. I buy the assets and I rehab them. This is what we do. We buy older apartments in crazy cities, Savannah, Nashville, Chattanooga, Jacksonville, Atlanta, all those kind of places. So what this does is, if you guys are ever going to do it, somebody was asking, how do I do this myself, right? Isn't that the question? You're here to learn, how do I ever get to the point where I can do this myself? It's taken me 30 years of doing the same thing every day for 30 years. So it takes a little while, but I've been an expert in one type of product, and it's multifamily value-add apartments. It's what I've always done, never done anything else. And the reason we can raise institutional capital is because that's all we do. And we talked about this a little earlier. The more capital you want to raise, the more defined you need to be. If you want to be a jack of all trades, you're going to limit on how much capital you're going to raise. If you're an expert in one particular type of asset, especially in real estate, because there's 1,000 of them, you have better chances of raising capital. So this is what we do. It gives you some idea. The first two were deals we bought in in Savannah, Georgia. Most of what we buy is from REITs. We talked about that a little earlier, where we get our product from. The REITs, the reason they're a good seller for us, the reason I left the REIT business, is a REIT has an inability to rehab inside the REIT because of the need to distribute 90 today, right? Used to be 95 in my day. 90% of their money back to the partners. It makes it very difficult for them to hold the dollars back to put back into a property. And Wall Street wants you to distribute your cash. So it's a very difficult story. They have to go to Wall Street, which is what we used to do, and have to sell them on the fact that this was an asset that we can put $2 million that they want us to distribute to the partners and put it into an asset that maybe is going to give them a little bit more cash flow. Almost impossible to do. So the REITs are an excellent seller of product that we want to fix up. And what we do is we fix them up, wash them down, clean them up, paint them up, put all new interiors in them, new kitchens, new bathrooms. I'm sure you guys have. Who doesn't live in an apartment? Okay, most of you guys are living in apartments here. Are most of them fixed up or not fixed up? New kitchens? No? Okay. Okay. Well, yes? No, we do the exterior, but you know, my success in this business is I started doing interiors in '97 and '98 before the rest of the world. Everybody came in and painted them, cleaned them up. I actually went the other way and started doing the insides first because I felt like the customer was inside the apartment more than they were outside the apartment. So, but we come in like the one on the right up on the top was an all gray. I wish I had the before pictures. I don't know if I have the before. No. Was an all gray building that had just no shutters, gross old roofs, which is typical of what most of you guys end up living in because that's most of our product out there. We came in, spent a bunch of money on the outside, and now we're doing the insides. But yeah, you know, at one time I started doing the new facades. Nobody cared. You know, all they really cared about is it was landscaped nicely. And what customers really care the most about, especially when you get out of college, is where it's located. You care most about where it's located, which is the key to our success, is where it's located is the most important thing in the apartment business. And how we rehab it. But you can over rehab. You know, personally I like stainless and granite and hardwood floors and crown molding. I'm the only one a lot of times that will be paying the rent for it. So you've got to moderate to what you do. So we'll come in, fix them up on the outside, and then over a 2 to 3 year period, we upgrade the interiors with what we have found the customer wants. We'll do 10 apartments from the beginning, 10 different things, and we try them out and see what you'll come in and look at it, and you'll say, God, you know, ick, I don't like that. And so they're writing down the notes, and then we pick the product that most people want, not all people want, and that's what we go with. But we don't do it for nothing. You know, we do it to get money out of it. And it's funny, it's not a lot of money. You know, we'll spend $6,000, $7,000 on an interior, and really $75 to $80 is all we need out of that to make a bunch of money, to get to our yields. It's not a lot of yield that takes that property and really makes it, for us, a lot of money, because if you sort of work that through the system and you have a 7 cap rate, and if you walk out of this room and understand how that cash flow meets cap rate, you're going to be more sophisticated than 90% of the people you're competing with in this industry. Because most people who buy real estate don't understand how that bottom line, how each dollar benefits you going forward. And that's what we work on. Yeah?
Is this only a rental issue, or are cap rates sensitive to the improvements that you're making?
Say that one more time.
Meaning, you know, when you're running your pro forma, are you only looking at bumping the rental rates, or are you saying if we bring this from a B- to a B+ property, we're expecting a 25 basis points decrease on our outgoing cap rate? I mean, do you factor in that to your equation, or is it only
well, I would tell you yes, in the sense that I think every property, and this is interesting, my world is, each piece of real estate, no matter what's on it, has a cap rate. Does that make sense? I'll walk, it doesn't matter, I try to look at a piece of real estate and take what's on there off and say if a brand new property was on that property today, and which is the way you have to do what I do, say clear it off, put something brand new, what cap rate would that sell for? Okay, 6.5. Well, really, that piece of property is a 6.5 cap rate potential. Is that what you're asking me? And I bought it at an 8. And my opportunity is, how do I get it down to that 6.5? Does that answer your question?
You make the improvements to raise the rents. I'm just wondering if that's all you take into consideration, or do you also consider it?
Well, I do 3 things. A, the ability to take it from a C- to a B+ gives me a lower cap rate. The other thing that it does, especially with REITs get to a point where they have no ability to capitalize, right? So if you have no ability to capitalize, then you expense capitalized items. Does that make sense? For instance, you have air conditioners on your property, okay? You don't have the money to replace the air conditioner. Okay, so what do? You fix the air conditioner every month. All right, so the $800 air conditioner has now cost you $600 of monthly expenses keeping that air conditioner going. So your point, that's my point of that is, if you put in a new air conditioner, right, that $600 needs to go away, right? Because if it was brand new, you wouldn't have that $600 expense. Agreed? So that's something else I do take into account as we rehab, especially the older ones that we're doing gut rehab to. We don't do a lot of gut rehab, but something like those where they've gotten so dilapidated that you really have to come in and say, hold on, I'm replacing everything. I've got to look at it as a new asset. And that's hard because when you guys were talking about doing acquisitions earlier, what you don't want to get clouded by in an acquisition is how somebody else is running your asset. You need to know what it costs you to run that property. That's the key, because a lot of people will send you stuff that you think you can run cheaper, but there's a lot of times people will send you something that they're going to tell you they're running it cheaper than you, that will cost you 1 to 2 times what they're paying for that property. So you need to be knowledgeable about what it costs you to run, and that's a real opportunity because the REIT product is always overexpensed. Usually, Aimco's product is usually $1,100 a unit too high on their expenses. It's a big number, right? You cap it, it's a big number. So you got to understand that going into an Aimco asset where equity doesn't have that issue. You know, it's probably $300 to $400 because they're capitalizing or newer assets. So that's what we do. We buy assets like this. Always like to buy new if I can, but I can't. Location is the key. Here's some more. Jacksonville is Southern Pines. Give you a quick story to that. We bought a property that BlackRock, I'm sure you guys know who BlackRock is, and GE did as a partnership to convert a property to condominiums. Okay? They bought the property for $29 million and put $2 million of trades in the property. Okay? The world changes, and they are sitting on an asset that we bought 18 months later for $13 million. Okay? Now, nobody likes that. I did. But they didn't like that at all. And that's really sort of what you've got going on now, especially in Florida. That's a very good example of what Florida looks like, especially on these condo conversions. They just have too much money in them. You know, the property was worth $65,000 a unit when we bought it in 2003. They sold it for $200,000 a unit. It never was worth that kind of money. Now it's reverted back. The other thing good about it, it's already been mostly rehabbed. We're doing the insides. But that's what's going on in Florida today. And that's the struggle that the banks are having. GE is one of the few that have been able to recognize these losses. You've got Lennar. Has anybody worked with Lennar at all, or LNR? Do you do anything with them? You know them at all? I'll tell you, if you're looking for a job in Florida, is drive to Miami. Is that where they're based? I think that's where they're based. And go get a job with LNR. You talk about a company that's got a ton of real estate coming at them. It's flying at them. They've got all this conduit debt and all this condo debt that they did that are going to hit the fan. And that would be a place to look for a job because they're about to see a ton of it. We deal with a lot of it. They're not ready yet, but it's getting closer. And then we just bought a property, Lakes of Vinings. little bit interesting story in there. There's a property that was under contract for $124,000 a unit 18 months ago from a condo converter. Fell out, sadly for equity, and we just closed it for $50,000 a unit. Now, it was an interesting deal from equity standpoint because equity needed to sell it because it was a 1970, does it say? 75, 76 asset. And inside a REIT, because of its age, they may have to hold back a larger amount of reserve because of the age of the asset. So no matter how well that property was doing, as the property got older, you know, when it's 5 years old, they have to hold back $200 a unit. When it's 25 years old, they were having to hold back $1,400 a unit in reserves against this asset. There was no way they were going to make any money on it, so they had to sell it. So for us, it's an opportunity because we'll fix it up, but inside a REIT, it just didn't work. Okay? Any other questions? Yes? Okay. Again, simple enough. This talks about what we do, 70s to 2000s. Hopefully 50 to 60% of replacement costs because we've got it. Our goal is to buy them and sell them. We're not a long-term hold player. We want to clean them up, shine them up, get the rents up, make them as new as possible, and then put them back to the marketplace. The B minus to B plus, A minus today, with where the lack of capital out there, we're able to really buy Bs and make them A pluses today. We're buying AAA locations, older assets. It's not something I've ever been able to do since I've been doing this business. Sort of fun for right now, but that'll change. Interior and exterior. The other thing that's important, and I have a couple up here, the other thing that's important that most people don't do in our business is put together a marketing and management plan for the property. The customer today are you guys. Okay? That's the customer for the rental properties today. That's what we all recognize. The problem is, you all said you're living in apartments that are unrehabbed, right? Very few people have new appliances, new kitchens, right? So you wouldn't live there in the long run. It's not something you're looking to live in, but most of the product is like that. 75 to 80% of the apartments in America are what you're living in. So we, as owners, have to not only work towards you. The other thing we don't do in our industry, which is crazy, less than 1% of the apartments in the United States take credit cards. Okay? You guys don't know what a check is. I mean, there's 3 people in my office under 25 years old. The only check they write every month is for rent. That's it. Everything else is done on a debit card, right? You guys write checks? Right? Do you guys write checks? I mean, I didn't know anything but a check. I hated my ATM card because it only got me in trouble. So, but we're having to evolve into your industry. You want an opportunity in our business is create opportunities for people like us to help us be more able to communicate to you. That's really a place that we struggle. We're struggling with it today. You know, the product you want, what you want from services. We're putting in fitness centers and spas and all these things. We're guessing. At some point in time, we're guessing. We're doing the best we can. We sort of cheat off the hotel industry and say, okay, this is what you're doing. But for us, I'm forcing my properties today to go to credit cards. But it costs me a fortune. I'm having to spend $30 for every renter every month to convert them from a check to a credit card. It's crazy. Other industries, it's 1% to 2%. But there's no way. The communication is just not in our industry. We're very antiquated. So that's a real opportunity for your generation to get us to be more sophisticated. And most owners are not very sophisticated. I was telling them earlier, I'm the younger of the generation that owns these things because there's very few people after me. The sort of that world went away after the '86 Tax Act. There are very few people that have been created after my generation. So you guys have a real opportunity out there, but you've got to be sensitive to your customer base. And then, you know, our other responsibility from a value add standpoint is to work with our industry, which is sort of the same thing. We are trying to become more sensitive to other product types. You know, we're talking to I'm talking to hotel companies today to merge them in to my product in some way so people can get points and have hotel places to stay. All those things, all those ways to blend our industry really is an opportunity because we need it. And we're trying to find ways to do it.
I'm sorry, can I ask you back to your last point for a second? Maybe explain a little bit, you own properties in a number of states. You don't search the internet for those. So maybe explain how you've got a referral network of brokers. Talk about how you source properties, where you get them, how many you look at before you purchase, kind of what the process is for how your firm evaluates the stuff that comes across your desk.
Okay. We probably look, last year we bought 5 properties, probably looked at 6,000 properties, easily, because all the banks have stuff. Last year was probably a flood of assets coming at us because everybody came to us because we had capital. So more than most years.
Everybody being
banks.
Listing broke, but who's coming to you? Who's bringing the?
Today it's probably there's some brokers, less today because they don't have product anymore. In normal business cycle, I guess it's probably a better way to look at it. In the normal business cycle, we get a lot of our product from the brokerage world. That's Cushman & Wakefield, CB, Apartment Realty, Apartment Group, et cetera, Dietz, whatever the companies are out there. They have a network of brokers that work in our product type, okay? The second level of people, and they are probably today 10% of what we get. In 2007, they were probably 70% of what we got because there were more active sellers. Today, there's less active sellers, so it's a little harder to dig the product. The other place we get product is from the owners because the advantage we have by being a capital provider is an owner can come to me and I can recapitalize his asset and get rid of his existing equity and he can stay in and manage. So that's another source. Plus our local management companies, we have 11 localized management companies who all have relationships in their marketplace. The reason I did the model we did was to tap into their local relationships because a big company in Orlando, everybody knows the big company in Orlando. So if they have an asset to sell in Orlando, they're going to call them before they're going to call me. So that's our other source. That's why we set up the joint venture model. Today, we talked about this earlier, we don't do joint ventures today because what's happening is the seller today are the banks, the institutions like Principal and BlackRock, and the REITs. And none of those people today want to sell to management companies because what's happened to them is they realize that most of the management, not all of them, but most of the management companies came to capital sources like us, where they realize most of those capital sources are gone today. You know, their principal equity is gone, right? So what they've done today is, from a pricing standpoint, they come directly to us. So that's been a huge today, but we talked about it earlier. That'll change in about 18 months because they'll realize that I'm buying them I'm skinny them too much. I'm looking for blood, and that's not good. So that'll change, but for right now, that's where the assets come from. And then from the banks, you get a lot of that comes from, so if you guys are looking where you get it, all of that's published. You guys track the sales in your cities, the bankruptcy sales. Other thing that's very important today, especially if you're living in Florida, every city has a requirement to publish what's being foreclosed. We're going to a foreclosure sale tomorrow in Nashville, Tennessee. There's probably 3 people showing up just because nobody's read the article, but the bank's going to foreclose on a brand new apartment building next door to one we already own. That's why I tracked it. But that's very important down here because it's a requirement that is published, and don't ever talk yourself out of not going to the sale. They're fun to go to in the first place. It's nothing more fun than going to a bankruptcy sale. They are too much fun. And I mean, the people that show up and the people that bid, you're going, you know, you can't buy that. And I mean, and they show up looking like they can't buy anything. But it's a lot of fun to do. I will tell you, in the state of Florida, you'll probably have, I don't know, they're already doing a bunch, I presume. But that's a real opportunity, and you'd be surprised what you can buy. So that's another big source for us. That was in 2007, crazy enough, we bought 6 properties at the courthouse steps because nobody knew how to do it. And a lot of these companies will make it difficult on you. They'll want all the money that day. So you'll buy a $7 million property. What makes us better at that than most is I can just write a $7 million check because I have it in the funds. I don't have it myself. That's what they're not ready for somebody to show up like that. Usually it's a bank or an individual that wants to own it, not expecting somebody else to compete with them. And in 2007, we were showing up and buying the stuff for nothing. And so that's probably here a big source of your product. I think you'll have the bankruptcy sales.
If you do participate in those sales, how are you protecting yourself for the due diligence process since you might not have had a chance?
Well, usually you have 30 days from notice. And they're required under law to provide you all the operating information that they have. The only thing that you need to do for yourself, which we're doing today, is having the title run yourself, see what's a lien on the title. You've got to be able to get clean title the next day, so you have to have a title person with you at the sale to be able to do that. But then they also have a requirement that you have the right to go walk that asset. With notice, you have the right to go walk units. Apartments are easy. You know, this is not brain surgery, as we talked about earlier. You walk in, the property looks terrible, the units all look terrible, you assess it and say it costs this to fix it. But again, I think there's an opportunity there here, especially. I don't know what the condo deal, the big thing here are the broken condos. We don't do those because I did those in the late 80s, and to get the control of those assets were impossible. I'm not trying to talk anybody out of doing that, but I will talk about that before I leave, is just be prepared at the sale. But you have plenty of time if you track the notices. Like this one, we found out too late, so I have people walking 316 apartments today. So to see what it is. Now, it's only 2 years old. Hopefully they haven't screwed it up that much in 2 years, but nothing's impossible. I'm going to junction over to that broken condos thing. I think it's important in Florida. I don't know you guys, I'm not sure where you are with raising money or whatever. Just understand when you buy a broken condo that you have no control, even if you buy 75% of the condominiums, okay? My business in 1986, 87, we were a huge condo converter in Nashville, Tennessee, and a lot of them went bust. And we'd own 75% of a condominium project and could never get the balance of the units. And we stayed in lawsuits for 15 and 20 years trying to get control of those assets. It's impossible. Now, we were trying to get them back. We were never trying to, because it was until 2004, you couldn't sell a condo. But it's a very difficult process. Understand the risks going into those broken condos before you buy them. Because if somebody comes in like me and buys a control interest, I'm going to make an assessment on you that's going to make your life miserable. That's how we ended up doing it at the end of the day, is we'd come in on a broken condo, and one of the rights we had because we controlled the condominium association is we would go to people and say, here's a $60,000 assessment. We're going to fix up this property. You might have paid $50,000 a unit for it. But that was the way we got control, because if you don't make your assessment, I have the right to take your unit. So just understand that there's ugly people like me out there who are willing to make your life miserable, who are worse than me, that if you do something like that, just understand that there are people that are difficult. Is that fair? Okay. Just because Florida's got a lot of that going on. That's the big product today. And I haven't played in any of that. But just understand the risks. If you get scared about it, you can call me, and I'll talk you out of it. This is just some ideas of what we do, befores and afters. This is typical of our stuff. This is normally what we see. It's an older building that looks like that on the left. the befores and afters, and you ask, do I do outside? This is what we do to an outside. You know, all we've done is take the outside and make it what it used to be. You know, we make it new, we put new paint, we fix up clubhouses. We now are doing, my first attempt at, we're doing modular clubhouses. It's great. All the cities are terrible about what they're doing to me from zoning, so now we're doing modular clubhouses. Today, what's great about modular, which they've changed, until about 2003, they could only do 8-foot ceilings. They've now figured out a way that they can ramp it up on the site, so now you can do 10-foot ceiling buildings, and these babies can be up in 90 days. Tell you, it's huge what that does for a property. And if you see them all the time because banks are done that way today and all that, but you just don't realize that that's what they're doing. But that's a big change in our industry, is to go modular. Yes?
How involved are you personally in your company in day-to-day construction?
Very.
You are your own owner's reps, or you deal directly with the construction manager?
Construction manager, the other thing that's important is our management companies only manage. I would say but that's not fair. We do all the construction. There's nothing that happens on that site that the property manager does, because it's two different things. It's absolutely, and it's taken me 10 years to get there, but the manager will get caught up in the weeds and forget to keep rehabbing. The continuation, the follow-through of the plan is what makes these successful. You have got to finish the plan. You can't do a half a rehab, because if you do a half a rehab, you'll be back to where you started. You've got to deliver, as I call it, you've got to deliver the baby. You've got to get to the finish line, because if you don't, you'll have an unsuccessful project. The worst projects we do are the ones that get stopped.
You do your own in-house estimating,
Yep. Yep. Bid it out. Everything's from A to Z. You know, we're doing on average $4 to $5 million worth of rehab to an apartment complex. So it all works at some point in time. I'm colorblind, but I still pick all the colors.
You use local subcontractors?
We try to. Usually we end up using locals for interior upgrades, those kind of things, you know, flooring. Where you end up using nationals are really for us for roofing and that kind of product, because we buy it nationally for about $120 a square for architectural shingle. We do so much of it that they're cheaper for us than trying to find a local vendor that we're doing one job at a time.
Do you take out an additional construction loan, or do you guys fund that out?
So it's fun. That's what we fund.
Okay, so you fund that straight out of it. Okay.
Yeah. The great thing about Fannie and Freddie is, if I'm right, today the way their loans work, I can do a second on their loans and take that money out in 18 months. So hopefully I'm right, not always. But that's the advantage, is if I rehab it, I put my own money in first, and then they let me refinance that out in 18 to 24 months. I've got to have the rent to do it, but they let me pull it out of there.
And what would that second term be?
It's coterminous with the first. They at one time had me with a tail, but we've all realized that's problematic. So it ends at the same time. Okay. And today I'm not doing those colors anymore. We've changed. Today we're doing black cabinets, and stainless and granite is our base product. A hardwood floor in general, or a hardwoody floory thing. It may not be hardwood. It may be a vinyl product, but it looks like hardwood. And it acts like hardwood. It's actually better than hardwood because it's better it's better for the customer. It's less allergen. Well, all these crazy things. But it's a product that the customer really likes. They like the black today. I started doing black about 2 years ago, and we all thought we were nuts and crazy, and we started painting cabinet blocks as black and stainless, and the customers would come in and say, "This is great," and we said, "Do it." And that's the great thing is, because we just say do it and it gets done. It's not like my house. I've noticed that I have no decision-making ability at my house. I tell my wife I only go to work so I have some ability to make a decision. But white always works. If you go basic, white always works, but it's too plastic today. And black was good, but the customer really likes the stainless. And it doesn't cost you any more money. You know, the funny thing is, if you work hard at it, we can do an entire upgrade of an apartment. And I know this seems crazy. Top to bottom, touching everything from appliances, flooring, two-tone paint, crown molding, faucets, sinks, tubs. You know, we're taking out the tubs and putting new tile around for $5,150, including the labor. And they got to get them done in 11 days. How about that? 11 days. No forgiveness.
You don't work with union labor, do you?
Well, if we do, and we do, like in St. Louis, we have to be more sensitive to what we do for a rehab. How about that? But that's the opportunity. So that's why $75, $80 works, because you can do it for $5,150. That's why most people don't do it. Is a REIT doing the same thing we're doing. Mid-America does exactly the same product that we do. It costs them $16,000 an apartment. Just because of the tranches that they have internally, it ends up I'm very intimate because I helped them buy all their stuff. It just turns out to cost them $16,000 a unit. So they don't do it, because you wouldn't do that for $75, $80. For $5,150, you do it all day. So yeah.
How do you phase the construction? Do you do it as the apartments turn, or
yeah, as they become vacant?
Okay.
Yeah, as I learned early in this business, and this is probably before your time, you can't take a Chevrolet and make it into a Cadillac overnight. You've got to, it takes about 2 to 3 years. Probably not. It's probably, I guess Chevrolet and Cadillac are still around, but that's true. You can't change that. You can't change the profile, because you've got to let the leases turn, and it takes about 24 months to go from one to the other. So, but it's fun. I was talking about earlier. What's great about this is it's fun every day. Thank God it's different every day. There's always some challenge out there every day that you've got to solve. And that's the great thing about real estate, is it's always something different every day. And the other great thing about this industry is you get to deal with all kinds of crazy people. You know, people are just nuts what they'll do. You can't imagine what apartments end up looking like with these people. Just, if you spend a day with me, it's crazy what they do. All right, we talked about this a little earlier. This is why we believe over the next 10 years it's a great time to be in the apartment business, are these issues. We talked about them earlier. Home rate declining. It's already declined a bunch in the last 2 years. 4%. Yeah, it's great. Each percentage point's about 2.6 million households. Unbelievable. Put those back into the apartment pool. Echo boomers, you guys, you want to be called that? Not, sorry. Development last year, in 08, it was 100,000 units. There's 4 million apartments in the United States. There was 100,000 units built in 08. In 09, it was 50,000 units, and they're expecting less than that in 010. And we lose, just from product that gets outdated and falls to the ground, you lose about 50,000 units a year that just comes off the rolls every year. So nothing is being built, and that's nationally. We talked about lack of capital, and the great thing is we still have financing. Oh, did I go right? Sorry. It's new and exciting. Sort of the same graph. This is good to see in a graph form. These are you guys coming out. I'm loving it. I'm not going to charge any more rent. But this is where we've been. Okay? Most of what was happening prior to 05 and 06, that group was going into condominiums. Nothing wrong with that. But now you've got this huge amount of people. It's a lot of people coming out that are going to need a place to live. And normally in America, 30% of all of you should be almost 40%. It used to be 45% in the good old days. Wasn't it 55% of, did it ever get to 55? I'm not sure. Home ownership to, how many people in the 60s were homeowners? 60%? Yeah. So 40% are normal apartment dwellers. Well, it got to a crazy number, right? Shouldn't have ever gotten there. Believe me, people that were owning, we had people that were not paying rent, who were 3 months behind. We were pushing them out of their apartments. We get a letter from a mortgage company and said, sorry, they've just bought a home. How about that? Somebody that is irresponsible on their rent, that is just qualified to buy a home. That was what was going on in 05, 06, and 07. Crazy. So all that will revert. My way I look at it is, I would venture to say for the next 3 or 4 years, where it's been 60-40, it'll be 80-20. Probably 80% of you will be renters for the next few years to balance that out. But again, we've got to be sensitive with our product. Home ownership rates, talked about. Completions. If you look at that graph, most of what's been built were condos. And as you see, we've gotten to a point where that's about to cross over. And so there's a real need. The other problem that the government's going to have, and I don't know if anybody's interested in affordable housing, what's going to happen is what happened in '81, where there's not going to be any affordable housing. It won't be very long. In Nashville, Tennessee, we're a 96% occupied market. And part of that marketplace is Section 8 housing. You don't build for 2 or 3 more years in a city that's growing, nobody will take that Section 8 tenant. And all these cities are going to be scrambling because all these cities have taken in this in-town product and put this big house product, taken these high rises and pushed these people out into the marketplace. Well, soon enough, those people won't have a place to live. And I will tell you what will happen in the next 3 years is the government's going to be squealing because there's going to be a lot of people who need affordable housing that won't get it. The advantage to this is they'll make some goofy law like they did in '81. They'll do deregulation, and I get 5-year depreciation, double declining balance, and we all live happily ever after, right? Those were great days. And they'll let me write it off of my normal income. But that's something that will happen. You're going to get to a point where there's not enough affordable housing. And I've been trying in Nashville for the last 2 years to focus on it, and these cities right now, they're okay, right? They've got a little bit overbuilt, especially in cities in Florida, but that's going to change dramatically because if you don't build, there's no place for these people to go. And that's for me, this is personal, but that's my least wanted renter, is somebody that can't afford to live where they live in.
But even if the federal government's sending the check directly to you?
Doesn't matter. Because and this is a generalistic statement, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it's a very generalistic statement. If they're not paying all their rent, they're not taking care of my unit. It's not 100% true, but I can show you it's 90% true. So that's just an issue, and the government's going to have to face up to that. That's where we are today. I think I might have added some. Is Florida on there? Yeah. So that's where we are by state. That's the cities. We like the diversification. Somebody asked me about diversification. For me, diversification is a real asset because when Little Rock's doing well, Jacksonville may not be doing well. When Wichita is doing great, which is doing great today, you'll have struggles in Kansas City. So it gives us the ability to balance that. We love diversification. And I would recommend if you do a fund, don't just do one city. If you do one city, then do diversify somewhere else because it's helpful to have enough diversification to balance out your yield. Okay? Again, trying to be sensitive to America. We have a green initiative, which we never realized we did before until we started reading everybody else's stuff that had a green initiative, and we said, we already do all these things. So we have a green initiative, which it's important, but again, the most important green initiative is to me is the almighty dollar. Okay? My investor cares more about the dollar than they care about these things, but we try to blend them, and we do a lot of these things, and you need to be sensitive to it. We do a lot of new windows, doors. You talk about loss of utilities. These older buildings, you can stick your hand through the walls most of the time. It's unbelievable what you can do in some of these older buildings. You know, we do energy saver appliances. It doesn't cost you any more today. You just have to be sensitive enough to buy them. Low flow water. On every property, we immediately go in and do all new toilets and all new sinks and faucets. We, overnight, will change our water bill by at least a third, almost half. Just shows you how much wasted water is out there. Digital thermostats so people can manage their stuff. We like saltwater pools. Economically, they're better for us, but the customer likes them better, and it's better for the economy. And We also don't do carpet anymore. I hate carpet. The customer today doesn't like carpet either because they abuse it. So what's happened to us is we do all hard surface except for the bedrooms. We'll put carpet in the bedrooms. And 85, 86 through 95, 96, my carpet would last me on average 6 to 7 years. Today, a carpet in an apartment complex lasts 18 months to 36 months, and it costs me the same as the hard product. So we have gone to hard product. It's awful how much, and from the landfill standpoint, good luck seeing what happens to carpet in a landfill. So we've gotten to the point where we just do some kind of hard surface. And the customer likes it better. It's cleaner from allergy standpoint, and pets, because pets are usually what destroys carpets the most. A cat, not that I don't like cats. Anybody have a picture? I like cats, but they can literally ruin the rentability of an apartment because people are allergic to cats. So even though they might not have sprayed, just the fact that they've lived on that carpet makes that unit less rentable to me. So that's another issue. And then we do a ton of roof and siding. We fix leaks. All that air release, all that stuff is stuff we do. And that's us. Not too many of us. All graduated from college, I think. And a variety of people. People in our industry, somebody asked me earlier, in our industry they've come from all kinds of places. We pull people out of the property management side because we need people that have property management knowledge. We pull people out of the institutional side because they need to know how the money works and how to make all. We have 2 guys that work for us that are Big 8 accountants. Is it Big 6, whatever they are? Big 2 accounting firms, whatever they are. And what was it when I was in 12, 14, Big 8? And then, but a variety of people to work for us, which is important today. You start in one of 2 areas. You either start in the construction area or you start on a site, okay? It's important for us. No longer do I hire anybody without either knowledge, because when you get to the point where, because I look at where I am, and the reason I can do what I do is I've worked on a site and I come from a construction background. So it's important, even if you end up to be the head of acquisitions, you've got to know how it works. So it might be a 6-month experience. It may be, we'll see how you're doing. It might be a 1.5 years. But it's a great, and it's a great experience. The apartment business in itself, and the reason it's great is such an unsophisticated business. We are in the 1800s in our sophistication. The competitor doesn't know what they're doing. Very few people in this business are sophisticated like you are, believe me. And it's an opportunity for you guys to learn something about an industry that you can make a huge difference in. And I know very little, and I'm trying to make a difference every day. So, and we're also hiring, so something important to know. But you got to be willing to live in Nashville, important, which has knocked out 98% of them so far, and be willing not to have some glamorous office desk job, because we don't do that either. And you will someday. This is the good side of our business is people make lots of money doing what we do. If you ever go to work for somebody like us, you get carry, which is great. You want that 20% to be worth something. And for us, it can be a real meaningful. I have a woman that worked for me who is retired today. She made about $3.5 million over about a 10-year period working for me in some of my old stuff. And she just retired on the carry. Okay? So understand that's how it works. It's how we all make money. Slow. We talked about it. I'm a turtle. We'll get to the finish line. It's not glamorous. I'm not a developer. I'm not flashy. Not any of those things. It's a turtle approach. But my whole theory has been you get rich slow in real estate. You don't get rich quick in this business. So it's just a perspective to have. Any other questions? Okay. Good? Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about what you find important in relocation?
The nice thing about our business, it's mostly like any city, is, I don't know, where are you from? All right, so if I'm going to buy in Sarasota, I'm going to want to be, let's see, what road do I climb over on? I used to own Camden at Palmer Ranch. Okay, in the Palmer Ranch, what do you call it? PUD. You know where that is? Off of Indian, is it Indian? What's this last exit? In, yeah, last exit in Sarasota. South. Clark. All right, Clark, you go in, you turn left, and there's a development called Palmer Ranch. It's a PUD, you know, $500,000 homes and up. What was important about that for me was I sold it to a condo converter, which was great, but there was a defined quality of neighborhood for me. Okay, the only other place I was willing to buy in Sarasota is over on the water, but I was too cheap to buy. I was not going to pay the kind of cap rates that somebody was willing to buy on the intercoastal or whatever you call it over there. Is it the Bay? I'm an East Coast person, so you know I never went to the West Coast. I'm kidding. But huh? Yeah, on the Gulf. But that's location for me is very similar to where you want to live. Apartments are easy. It's not like a shopping center or an office building or an industrial park. What's nice about apartments is if you would want to live there in a home, then you would want to live there in an apartment. And that's really sort of how we look at it, is I'm going to the best neighborhood in the city. Now, you can't always buy apartments there, right? Try to, but that's the goal. So it's a little simpler than trying to figure out, all right, I've got a Walmart, and I've got these concentric circles, and I've got this concentric circle, and this guy's got 38% of this concentric circle, which you guys made me do. And I'm thinking, hell with that. I can just buy an apartment building, and I can know that it's in the right location, right? So that, you know, right? Just trying to tell you how it works. But that's really, apartments are very, where you'd want to live as a home is how apartments work. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? And I'm sorry for cursing in class. I said hell. I won't do it again. Sorry for that. Can I give you my other basics? Okay, my other basics are to be successful. Can I do this? Guess might as well, because I'm going to do it anyway. Pick a particular type of real estate. Don't do it, whether it's being a, and I started off as an appraiser, right? So I found what I liked and I stuck with what I liked. Have a good faith in God, first and foremost. I'm Tim Tebow down the middle, and I'm grateful for my kids that Tim Tebow went to school, because all my kids want to go to the University of Florida, and I tell them every day that everybody comes out of the University of Florida looking like Tim Tebow. Whether that's true or not, it works at home. And just be consistent. You know, don't be afraid, and we talked about this on the way, don't be afraid to stick with this. It's going to be a little tough, a little rocky for the next 18 months. But if you find an industry you like and the type of real estate you want to be in, stick with it, because it's going to get unbelievable in this industry in a very short period of time. And it comes at you fast. The 86 Tax Act happened, 88, 89, 90 was miserable. It was miserable. 93, 94, 95, we were having a ball. So it doesn't take that long. Just be patient with it. In an equivalent way, you're at about 1990 in the after the 1986 Tax Act. That's where we are at about the same time frame. You have a question? Or are you just flipping your pen? That's very good. My son tries to do that. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.